What's up, gang? How's my lovelies out there doing? Welcome back to Stir Crazy, episode number 73, I believe. Democracy delayed is democracy denied. How's everybody doing out there? I'm your host, Kim Brown. Thank y'all for indulging me a day off, and thank you very much to Charles for filling in for me on Tuesday. And I'm so excited to be back, and so glad to see all y'all smiling faces or smiley emojis in the comments or in the chat. Of course, we always want to hear from you here at Stir Crazy. So if you have comments, questions, concerns, critiques, all the above, just drop them on in the chat. Our normal chat bouncer, James, is off this week. So shout out to Molly Shaw, who was holding down those duties for us today in the chat. Hey, there we go. So we do have a lot to get to in today's show, including here on Stir Crazy, we always try to keep you updated on the various protests and actions that are happening across the country, because in a lot of cases, the national news media has lost interest and is not even covering the fact that there are nightly protests in a majority of American cities. And this has been ongoing and this has been sustained. So we're definitely going to bring you some footage from some of those actions in different places. But we're also going to show you some troubling video of how the police are acting like assholes and beating shit out of people still, violating people's civil and constitutional rights still. And we'll get into that as well. Plus, we're going to discuss the passing of former GOP presidential candidate Herman Cain. Herman Cain dead today at age 74 from COVID-19. He was at Trump's Tulsa rally back in June. So, you know, obviously we're not Herman Cain political fans over here, but at the same time, he was a life, and COVID is a sad way to go. So we're going to talk about that in just a bit. Plus, we're going to discuss how a lot of these so-called progressive mayors and states and district attorneys, you know, talk real tough to the Trump administration about allowing federal agents on their respective city streets. And one of those state's attorneys was the one from Baltimore City, Marilyn Mosby. And we're going to discuss how fondly the national media views Marilyn Mosby, which is a big contrast to how she is covered locally in Maryland. So if you see Marilyn Mosby on MSNBC and you're like, oh my God, wow, she really gets it. No, she doesn't get it. And we'll get into those reasons as well. But of course, we always want to hear from you. Again, chat, comments, hit us up on Twitter, Periscope. Yep, I know we're broadcasting live there. So what's up? Bienvenidos to everyone who's tuning in and watching us via that channel. But now it's time to bring in our fantastic panel. We've got a full house today, kids. This is like, what was it? See, I'm messing it up. I'm trying to make a full house comparison. And of course, let's see, we got Danny Tanner and we've got, Uncle Jesse, and everyone showed up today to join us for our fantastic panel. We are joined with our executive editor here at The Real News, Lisa Snowden-McCray, and our climate reporter representing the Climate Bureau, Aman Azhar. Independent and investigative journalist Justine Barron is here. And of course, our Thursday guy is how I have referred to you, Andrew. He is our Real News visuals and research producer, Andrew Corkery, Mr. Thursday. That's what we call him. So what's up, gang? How are everybody doing? Thank y'all very much for tuning in and showing up with us today.
Glad to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Brilliant. So where we're going to begin, kids, is let's start with the announcement from Donald Trump. President Trump, I hate even saying those two words together, but Donald Trump tweeted earlier today that he intends to, or he is okay with possibly delaying the election because, again, Donald Trump is already throwing chum in the water regarding the fact that something could be amiss with the mail-in ballots and people voting absentee. Here's his tweet. He says, with universal mail-in voting, no absentee, which is good, 2020 will be the most inaccurate fraudulent election in history. It will be a great embarrassment to the USA. Delay the election until people can properly, securely, and safely vote. Well, that has bad foreshadowing, does it not? Donald Trump is already casting, he's already discrediting the election before it even happens. And here we are at the end of July, and we have, about 4 months until the election. So I definitely wanted to go around the horn to the panel and get your take on this, because many are fearing that this is a foreboding harbinger of Donald Trump's intention to not leave office and to go ahead and execute those strongman authoritarianism wet dreams that he has every single night, seemingly, of never leaving power and letting his white nationalist doctrine just continue unfettered. Lisa, I know you had a chance to see that. What did you think when you read that tweet from Trump today?
I mean, I think that if there's anybody right now who doesn't think that Trump was going to just respect, like if today was your first indication that Trump might not respect rule of law, like I really want to live in the magical bubble that he's been giving us lots of indications from the beginning, way back to the debate stage when he was on stage with Hillary Clinton and kind of making these hints last time. So there's that. There's also the fact that behind every one of Trump's seemingly kind of chaotic and maybe even foolish or stupid statements, there is a whole machine working behind him to make that threat a reality. I was just thinking when he said, we should withhold this election until it's safe and secure and easy for people to vote. If we did that, we would never have had any elections in the United States, because it's already been a white supremacist agenda to make sure that people of color, especially Black people, couldn't get to the polls. So there's that also.
Aman, this reeks of stuff that Americans are not used to seeing, right? And people are very much at least concerned. And if they're not super concerned right now, we really should be. Clearly, we've never had to vote during a pandemic, at least not in the last 100 years. But the safety of this election and whether or not people can actually literally show up to the polls and cast a vote without catching a potentially deadly virus is a legitimate concern. But since when does Trump give a fuck about people catching the coronavirus? He's let 150,000 people die, 4 million people be infected in this country, and now all of a sudden he's concerned about the accuracy of the election and whether or not it will be fraudulent and casting dispersions or aspersions towards mail-in voting and absentee voting.
Yeah, I think, Kim, appalling as it is, I think let's not make any mistake. This continues to be the arc that the president has been pursuing all along, which is to dispute anything that kind of challenges his narrative. That's been his tactic from day one, and now he's going probably just one step further. He's been saying all along that the process is rigged, and now he's continuing with the strategy of deepening the constitutional crisis. The president, this White House, believes in sowing the seed of hatred, and it thrives on that chaos. So everything that's coming out of the White House right now is continuing with the same arc. Maybe he even sees the writing on the wall. I mean, let's not forget, he pretty much lost the popular vote last time. So it came down to the constituencies, which got him into the office. So, and now this time around, when there's a surge of COVID-19, of course, the economy did tank, and what's going to happen in short term is anyone's guess. So this, of course, it ties into this strategy of now kind of come out and kind of stain the process. What is also appalling is where is the GOP and the people from Republican camp? I mean, at the end of the day, we do still live, in theory, in a constitutional democracy, which means that we're working with a bunch of institutions, each of which has a particular constitutional limits around them. So this march towards constitutional monarchy is just acceptable to people sitting in the legislators and people sitting in the court systems and administration of justice. Where are they is just appalling to me. So President is doing what he's doing, of course, but what is also kind of very mind-boggling is that there is no legal constitutional challenge coming from the other branches who have a stake in this power game.
I want us to hear from Secretary of State Mike Pompeo when asked by Senator Tim Kaine about the president's comments. Let's take a listen to that.
You are one of the most highly trained and accomplished lawyers who are part of this administration. Can a president delay a presidential election?
Senator, in the end, the Department of Justice, others will make that legal determination. We all should want, I know you do too, Senator Kaine, want to make sure we have an election that everyone is confident in. It's not only free.
Are you indifferent to the date of the election?
It should happen lawfully.
Right.
Yeah.
It should happen lawfully.
Yeah.
So for the record, because you may not want to comment on it, but I do think it's important. A president cannot delay an election. The date of the election is established by Congress. It was established in 1845. There is no ability for a president to delay an election. And I don't think it's that hard a question or one that should lead to any equivocation by somebody who's fourth in line of succession to be president of the United States.
Justine, I have a feeling that, Trump and his whole administration are in the White House playing Big Sean, I don't give a fuck at high levels, right? You saw the snarky smirk on Pompeo's face when he gave that kind of bullshit answer. As Aman said, the GOP does have a stake in this democracy, but at the same time, it's clear that because they got their guy in office that, there's no rules, baby. 2020, no rules.
I mean, honestly, I thought Tim Kaine had kind of the same smirk. Like, I don't know, Tim Kaine, just not really delivering. He kind of did at the end, but it seemed just like two old white guys with the same exact smirk, like talking about what might happen. See, look at them.
I think that's called a shit-eating grin.
Exactly. Both of them. And it's like, I'm right. Oh, I'm going to get you. Don't forget about Congress. And it's also like, well, yeah, the Congress decides the election, but a lot of Congress is on the side of the president. So for me, like all of this this wouldn't be the first stolen election. We've had quite a few. And I think all of our presidential elections are effectively stolen because of the Electoral College. But what this lays bare and continues to lay bare is that there's like no opposition. I mean, if Tim Kaine is the best that we're going to get in terms of like really challenging, we need to be arresting these people 4 years ago. I'm just so tired of it. I'm tired of like smart tweet comebacks from our opposition party leaders.
Oh, speaking of that, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi did have a response to the president's tweet/threat. Let's take a listen. Oh, it's an article. Sorry. My bad. I thought it was a clip. Okay, well, yes. Even still, Pelosi responds to Trump floating election delay by quoting from the Constitution. Does Trump give a shit about the Constitution? Andrew Corkery, answer that for you. The answer is no. But Justine raises a great point. Like, I too am tired of these weak ass Twitter clapbacks from Democrats, from the party not in power. What did Pelosi call Trump the other day? Mr. Make Things Worse. Ooh, that's telling him, Nancy. Yeah, that'll get him. No. Andrew, the Democratic response to this constitutional crisis that is laying right in front of us.
The Democratic response to this constitutional crisis is an industry of neoliberal hand-wringing that doesn't focus on anything related to the structural causes of the situation that's currently going on right now. So, you guys already said it really well. Like, Trump is just taking this, taking the media and everyone else for the proverbial, ride right now and basically taking up the news cycle with him, saying that, he's going to threaten the Constitution and, all these things about the election being delayed. When in reality, I mean, he does have mechanisms within the White House that could lead to a situation where, the election is either delayed and or nullified. I mean, he could go to all the state governors that are Republicans, all the Republican state governors around the country, and ask them not to appoint, their delegates, for the election and hand wring and delay everything. So, I mean, there are ways that he can do this. I mean, and we have to remember too, Trump psychologically is incapable of losing. So if he does actually lose, the worst of Trump comes out when he's in the corner. So, I mean, he's just going to go full on gaslight. He's already trying to purge people within the military who are surrounding him and his national security advisors. He's trying to purge people in the military that he views as, unfavorable of Trump or, Democrat military people, things like that he says all the time. So this is just part and parcel of a larger strategy that Trump has been enacting for the better part of 4 years. And I agree. We should have been looking at this, in terms of a policy perspective for a long time ago when he was elected in office. I knew that he wasn't going to, leave, unless he was actually physically forced out, on CNN, like live television, basically. It's not going to be a Nixon peace sign leaving, I don't think. It's going to be, Trump in a straitjacket at this point.
I'm sorry. That was a bit of a comical picture right there in my head, Andrew. Let's take a look at what Bernie Sanders had to say. He did tweet out a response to Trump's assertion about the election being fraudulent and inaccurate. Bernie Sanders' response: "No, Mr. President, we are not delaying the election. The American people are sick and tired of your bullshit." No, he didn't say that. "Are sick and tired of your authoritarianism, your lies, your racism. On November 3rd, 2020, democracy will prevail and your disastrous presidency will end. Bye-bye." Well, again, it sounds great, Bernie, but don't you guys think that it is sort of imperative right now at this point, as we are several weeks away from Election Day, 12-ish in that neighborhood, that they actually articulate a plan to get him out of the White House? And I don't mean simply defeating him at the ballot box. I mean literally kicking his ass out. I mean, putting him, Melania, Barron, everybody got to go. Pack your shit. Go on the front lawn. We'll meet y'all in the Rose Garden. We're going to have the U-Haul pull up and load up your gold toilet. I mean, what is the plan, Democrats? Like, y'all have got to articulate a plan, because truthfully, I think that would be something to really engage voters, especially voters who are either, apathetic towards Joe Biden or lukewarm towards Joe Biden. It's like, if Joe Biden really started talking tough right now, look, when I win this election, I'm going to get the National Guard. We're going to have these people, them people. Everyone's going to be ready to physically remove him from the White House. But I feel as though the Democrats are too interested in civility, and still adhering to the fact that we are in a normal political process right now, which we are definitely not. They are still so beholden to the status quo. They don't want to say anything incendiary, though Trump says incendiary things all the time. Lisa Snowden.
Yes. I don't know what I don't know what else to say, because you just made a really good point. The thing that keeps popping into my head, because I wasn't thinking about so much like the Democrats' response until Justine pointed it out, is like that thing that happened a few weeks ago when they all did the little, I guess, Wakanda salute or whatever, when they all had the kente cloth masks on. Like, we're literally on fire and burning and sinking, and Democrats are doing the absolute least. So I don't know. It's funny because, I always end up, whenever I'm on this show, ranting about Larry Hogan. So sorry. But like, there's a slightly less terrible way that's also happening here in Maryland, where Hogan has decided that we're just going to have normal elections. And if you want to vote by mail, you have to make the effort to like opt in and doing that, which I think we all know as adults, like, if you're going to make me do an extra step, most adults aren't or can't do that. And the Democrats that we have in charge here are just like, if you do that, then we are going to be mad and do stuff. Like, you also could and should be doing things right now. Like they won't in Maryland, Maryland's ostensibly a blue state. They could be calling special elections right now, and they haven't. So all that to say that it's a top-down problem with Democrats, that they need to get some freaking cojones or backbone or both or something.
Speaking of Democrats, wait, hold on. From the comments, Paul X BSOG says, is it our duty to arrest him if he doesn't step down? Who is our, Paul? I know you mean well. Who is us? Like me, you? No. The white people have to get involved, baby. I mean, I'm talking about powerful, rich white people. I don't know if it means Bezos and Zuckerberg and them, or if it's a different set of rich, powerful white people. But they don't care what black people have to say in this process, and that is perfectly clear. But speaking of, Democrats who like to talk a good game, we've heard from a collection of mayors and top prosecutors from across the country in light of Donald Trump sending federal agents into cities that have had sustained uprisings, protests, demonstrations, where these protesters have been gassed. People have been arrested, kidnapped from off the street. And one such state's attorney was from Baltimore City, Marilyn Mosby, who gained national prominence for charging police in the murder of Freddie Gray back in 2015. However, no convictions, nobody went to jail. Freddie Gray's murderers walked the streets free. But that hasn't stopped the national media, both television and print, from fawning over State's Attorney Mosby because she talks tough to Trump. Our own Justine Barron right here on this panel, she wrote a brilliant piece on fair.org talking about this exact thing. National media promotes progressive Baltimore prosecutor ignoring local alternative exposés. Justine, I want you to bring us up to speed here about the issues, about how this looks, the optics of how the MSNBCs and the New York Times, love to have Marilyn Mosby on and allow her to talk tough to the Trump administration. But at the same time, she's letting a lot of illegal bullshit fly in Baltimore City. Bring us up to speed here, Justine.
Yeah, sure. So what I think a lot of us in Baltimore noticed after George Floyd died was that our own state's attorney was on television like every day, every network besides Fox, giving interviews and writing one op-ed after another, sort of presenting herself and her prosecution in the death of Freddie Gray 5 years ago as a model for how, if we're going to talk about police reform in this country, then we should have prosecutors stepping up and prosecuting bad police officers. And she was kind of finger waving at the Minnesota prosecutor at first, saying like, why are you waiting? Go prosecute. That's what I do. But she doesn't do that. And the amazing irony that I pointed out in that article, and that a lot of people in Baltimore were talking about, was there she was on television saying, and an op-ed titled, "Prosecutors Stand Up to Police" in the New York Times, where one after the other, the exact same week she published that, one after the other cop was being exonerated by her office. And then the victims that they assaulted were shot. A woman who was kind of having what appeared to be a mentally, maybe some kind of mental illness episode, got punched by a cop and fell down unconscious. She got prosecuted by Mosby. He did it. And there were several in a row of her office declining to prosecute while she's on TV saying, please stand up to police. And so so what I highlighted is that we've been following her locally. We know what's up. We know that she hasn't prosecuted cops seriously since Freddie Gray. And we also know, which I wrote about in the appeal, that she blew that Freddie Gray case on purpose, that she sort of made up this rough ride story when he was actually assaulted and killed by police. So we know that she doesn't have any record at all of standing up for police. And if anything, really what she does is support and protect bad cops. And so this is like this is sort of everything wrong with liberalism, the Democratic Party, and liberal media in this country, which is that they have just created an idea of this young Black female progressive prosecutor with who is literally the opposite. And just one other thing I'll add is that I just read a book by a colleague of Lisa and I, Brandon Soderberg and Baynard Woods. They wrote a book called I've Got a Monster, which is about the gun trace task force scandal. So a whole bunch of cops were prosecuted by the federal government for being criminals on the force, right? They were running drug dealing and murdering while they were police officers. When that came out a couple of years ago, Mosby has not given one fire and brimstone speech about those cops. She hasn't pursued any more of the corruption around them, hardly at all. She just keeps going back 5 years. And that's what hit me. I was like, wow, she has made so many speeches about the 6 officers involved in Freddie Gray's death. And she has never really made a speech or gotten angry about corruption since then. So I hope that kind of sums it up with our situation here. It's tough. It's hard to challenge her because somebody has to really go to the left of her and say, hey, she's not progressive. But none of the people who run against her are willing to do that.
And also, if I can just tag myself in.
Tag in.
It kind of intersects, Justine and I are kind of on a mind meld with this in a lot of ways, but it intersects with me the way that I kind of yell about the need for diversity in journalism. Because I think when you're dealing with a young Black woman, really like any Black figure, it's mostly going to be written about by a white reporter and by a white institution. And I think that there are things that they can do wrong and be super harmful. And also kind of treat her in a lighter way because they don't want to be like, oh, I don't want to get dragged. I don't want to make a mistake and do something racist. Where if you had more Black people, if you had a Black woman that could say, this and this is happening, Mosby has kind of done this thing where if there is reporting that comes out of Baltimore that's negative, she'll just say, oh, they're being racist or they're coming down on me. Where, if you're a journalism institution and you're wanting to bring the truth to light, you can really help yourself by bringing some Black people in that can write about the stuff that Justine's talking about. So you can't say, oh, well, Justine's just a racist white lady who doesn't want me to succeed. So.
Well, can you tell them what happened when you spoke up to her about not giving interviews? Because you're a Black woman, and how did she respond to you?
Oh, she just told me that I was being biased. And then I was like, but how? And then she was like, I don't have time to talk about this.
Girl, MSNBC is calling. She don't have time to go back and forth.
And that's true. And she has resources. She did this interview with April Ryan. She knows powerful people. And the interview was basically you're awesome. Tell us how you're awesome. Or she can reach out to MSNBC because like Justine said, she is what centrists and liberals want. She is kind of hinting at progress without actually being progress. And that's great because that means that we don't actually have to do the work of fixing stuff and making life better and easier for people who aren't, getting paid 6 figures to run a city institution.
Mm-hmm. And Aman, that's a problem that I think a lot of public officials, elected officials across the country, especially Democratic elected people in mostly Democratic or mostly cities of color, Black, brown, et cetera, they might talk a little tough about the police. And I'm sort of hearing Lori Lightfoot a little bit in my head, the mayor of Chicago, who initially said that she didn't want Trump to send 200 agents to the city, but then she was okay with it so long as they didn't behave like the federal agents in Portland. But the fact that these different agencies were coming into her city to execute law enforcement duties, she seemed generally to be okay with that. It's a matter of everyone that's your skin folk ain't your kin folk.
Yeah, I think that's the unfortunate part. I mean, with Democrats, as I said earlier on as well, it's just so convenient to say a few things on Twitter and then just let the let the conversation happen and just sidestep and do what you do normally every day. That's become so convenient even for Democrats, and they've just literally been taking turns screwing people, as I say often, and which is why exactly the situation is where it is. And as for everybody else, I think everybody, they seem to understand that if they need to get anything done, police is part of the executive. So if they kind of go tough on police, a lot of people, I think, in these systems of power kind of feel as though they will be going against the grain so their only job is to get into the system and then let the system dictate the way things should go and not their own public agenda, which is the basis for getting them in the office in the first place. And that's tragic, truly. And this is why and that's what is so appalling about this. And why do people continue to kind of do this spade work to securing their right, even when they get their people in the systems of power, only to see them drifting away towards the regular currency, where then executive takes on its own power and everything else kind of go with the business as usual. That's what is problematic about this system, that everybody who is elevated to these structures of power can then just flow in the way things have always been, and then let the people fend for themselves as they have always been, which is exactly why the classic definition of why the system is broken all around.
Andrew, last week we did feature a clip from Philadelphia District Attorney Larry Krasner, where he also talked tough to the Trump administration and said that, if we have troops coming into the city of Philadelphia behaving in the way that they did, the federal agents behaved in Portland, then we will convene grand juries and we will get these people charged. And, if we're taking the example from Marilyn Mosby, she had a real tough time getting cops to investigate other cops and bring evidence to potentially charge and indict other cops. So, this process is muddy, in my opinion, that if these federal agents continue to break people's constitutional rights, but it's not so different than what the regular city police do to citizens in these exact cities every day.
Yeah, I mean, I think with Krasner too, it's just like, I think there's a little bit of a difference between him and Mosby in the sense that, he was elected more on like a Black Lives Matter ticket, and a lot of Black Lives Matter activists rallied around him and made sure that he became the DA. That said, there's a limited amount of power for what the DA can do in Philadelphia because, the police union and the police apparatus inside of Philadelphia, as in Baltimore as well, control a lot of the media apparatus through giving access to different reporters and to different reporters about information that's going on. So the mainstream media, both in Baltimore and in Philadelphia, more generally in the country as well, is fundamentally based on having these connections and relationships with police to report on these low-level crime stories without actually getting to the heart of why the crime exists in the first place, because of issues like redlining, because of issues like, systemic racism in higher office and how that's borne out in communities and investment and all these sorts of things we talk about on the Real News all the time, in addition to other things. But I mean, I think that the problem is there's a disconnect in the sense that, some of these people are elected on a platform to kind of get a broad base of people to support them. And then when they get in there, they're kind of like this vessel for different things that they think are politically expedient or they think are politically, advantageous for them in their individual career and or what the public likes. And so what we've seen is people like AOC and Krasner to a certain extent, and also, Jamal Bowman and stuff like that in New York, they actually articulated and came up with their own progressive agenda that they sold to the American people and that the American people bought into because the ideas are popular and because people want these things done, as opposed to putting out like random platitudes like Biden's doing right now and hoping that, a broad base of, rural white former Republicans and or centrist Democrats, along with Black people, along with people of color, will vote for you. So it's a fundamentally different viewpoint on how politics should operate and how you should create an environment to foster change in your own reality.
Guys, I want us to move along. My goodness, I didn't realize that we had 20-ish minutes left. That doesn't leave us a lot of time. But I did want us to take a look and focus on some of the protest actions that are still happening across the country. Well, we are going to start in Portland, where it's been going down, and this is the white revolution that I wanted to see. I wanted to see this exact thing: white bodies protecting.
Uh-oh. Yeah, Dwayne, if you just want to roll the video, we can talk about it. Okay. I'm not okay.
Here.
Actually, that action was happening in New York City. I think that might have been in Brooklyn. That was a march of Black women walking down the street saying, you know, we don't get no peace, fuck the police. I dropped off of this broadcast for a couple seconds, so my bad. But I also wanted us to check out some of the other actions happening. This one in D.C., which very similarly to Portland has had sustained nightly actions for 50 plus days. And citizen journalist Chuck Modiano has been out there pretty much almost every night at Chuck Modi on Twitter. And he had a comment at the end of this clip we're about to see there. Let's check that out.
Hey y'all, Chuck Modi here, 395 Tunnel. DC protesters took it, sending love out to Portland, sending love out to the Portland protesters, sending love out to all the great Portland street journalists who are telling the truth about what's going on and not letting the big media set the narrative. So my love to all of you. Also want to let you know, protests are still going on in DC. They've been going on in DC without the help of corporate media, who has not been here. And what does that tell you? Have they been too peaceful for corporate media? Has that been the problem? So the fact that there's been a media blackout in DC, because we're like on day 55 and you see stuff still happening, it doesn't look like anyone's gone away. So what's the message? Is the message that if there's not broken glass, you won't cover it? That if there's not fire, you won't cover it? Because that's the message. So when you won't cover the peaceful protests, when there's none of those things that you say are bad, none of that violence and property damage that you say are bad, and you won't cover it, then you are complicit when the violence happens. CNN, when there's a fire, you lit that fire by only showing up when there's fire. MSNBC, you broke that glass when you only showed up for broken glass. That's the message. Wash Poe, you're down the block. You're doing bad coverage on the Portland protests, and you can't even send a person down the block to cover the DC protest. Why can't you do that? What is your explanation for that? The budget costs, the travel costs are much less. Do your job again, Wash Poe. Do your
Dragging the Washington Post down to 395 tunnel. Let's go around the horn here, gang. I want us to put our media critiques hat on because I have to confess, I don't watch CNN, nor do I watch MSNBC because I like having peace in my life. But I know others on here are consumers of that news. Lisa, let me start with you. Like, how good or bad of a job are the mainstream outlets doing with covering now, 8 weeks of these uprisings and these sustained actions?
I mean, I was actually on a call earlier with a bunch of other news outlets, and they were talking about how to fix diversity issues. Like, we've known about diversity issues in journalism for a decade. They could have been fixed. And right now, like every once in a while, when we kind of more collectively decide as a culture we care about Black people, that's when these kind of conversations like the one that I was on started. So like, if we're going to go back a few years and talk about the last time people decided they cared about Black people, a lot of these organizations could have found more writers, could have done the work to cover this effectively. In Baltimore, I tweeted out like kind of way at the beginning of this nationwide action that I know that Baltimore City, the journalists here in the city are not equipped to cover this because I know the work that they are not doing to educate themselves on issues. Like if you are covering Black people and you don't know about Willie Horton and you feel free to admit this in public, that's a problem. But that also intersects with another issue that's happening in which journalism is just shrinking because it's controlled. We're lucky. We're here at like this nonprofit news outlet. But even if we are going to take the Sun, and I want to give, and I do decide that I want to extend them some grace, they're owned by they're owned by Tribune Media, which is just awful and has been shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. So we have an instance where it's like, do we even want to maybe, if we have this newsroom that's been decimated so much that we're making all of these journalists take furloughs, do we want to send our kind of clueless, food reporter out to cover this? It's like, what is better? What is better here? Is it better to ignore it totally, or is it better to send some clueless white person that just happens to not be furloughed to this place? But we're basically in a super bad place. And we seem to need more folks like this guy, Chuck. Like I talked to a lot of people apparently today, but I was talking to a bunch of students at the University of Maryland, and I told them like, there's literally nothing right now from stopping you from starting to write. There's no part that like, somebody's gonna hand you a form and be like, yes, now you can write, because the impetus is on people right now, like Justine, who works independently, or like this gentleman that was on this call, to kind of pick up your pen or your laptop or whatever and start writing, because of cluelessness and racism and also just like fucked up economics, we're not going to be able to get these stories from like the Washington Post or whatever the NBC or CBS affiliate in your town is.
I mean, Andrew, does this really come down to Black erasure and erasure of allies, people who are standing with those who support the movement for Black lives? Because as Chuck Modiano said in his video clip, because shit isn't burning down and there's not broken glass everywhere, people pissing on the corners, they just don't care. Like, because those things aren't happening, then the national spotlight dims quite a bit because it's not sexy, because stuff is not, being torn down at this point during the uprising. Is this their way of trying to say that these protests either A, aren't happening or not happening with the same veracity as they were in the days and weeks after George Floyd was initially murdered?
Yeah, I think the media has kind of lost sight of what their contribution to the dialogue is at this point, because they've been so out of the loop on what is affecting people of color, like in this world, and particularly in the United States, for so long, just like Lisa outlined, because they're not educating themselves about what's going on in these communities as to why certain things are happening and who's responsible, and the systematic, racist police system that we have in cities across the country. And at the same time, couple that lack of research and that lack of understanding about what's going on with the fact that they're fundamentally, organized in such a way, the media, to focus on issues that, are sensational, and that get people's attention immediately in the context of, having a memory of a goldfish. So, I mean, it doesn't allow you to explain things. And coming from, before I worked here, I worked at a mainstream news outlet, and there's a lot of great people that work in the mainstream media, but the structure of the mainstream media is set up in a way that, if a fire happens in a city, you have to send all of your resources there to do that, because that's what's newsy, that's what's now. And so there's no attention to detail on things that affect people systemically within a large, broader framework of what's happening in society. And so until you get that framework in there, and until you add diversity, until you add voices of color and people from marginalized groups and people that are, economically impoverished as well, until you add those people to the mix and you change the structure, those are the two things that you need in order to kind of change how the media is framing the situation, and both of which are not happening within the current confines of the situation.
Actually, Kim, if I could chime in quickly. Yeah, I think building on what Andrew was saying, that's why Chomsky has his thesis of manufacturing consent is kind of so relevant even today. And I must say that this has been structured as such. I mean, of course, an organization like ours don't have the kind of resources that Washington Post has or CNN has. And as if they don't have their sources, of course they do. Of course they can get into the nitty-gritty of things if they so choose to. But because this whole enterprise of corporate media ties into the corporate agenda, of course, we know that Jeff Bezos owns his media empire and Washington Post. So can they go against that grain? Of course not. And of course, the other legacy papers for that matter. So just this has already been, even in theoretically, and I rest my point after that, is that this whole thing about military industrial complex has been upgraded for the last 20 years. This has now been branded as military industrial media entertainment network. It's part of the same arc, from the hard power to the soft entertainment power, all of which is to keep this dumbing down of the nation, keep plowing forward at the basis of it's now a multi-billion-dollar industry just to keep people ignorant. And media, the corporate media, the big media is instrumental in doing that by decontextualizing the reporting and just making it to just exist in the now with no history, no nothing.
Justine, I want to get your take on this, but before I do, I want us to play these videos that came out of New York City over the past couple of days of a Black woman protester being abducted by plainclothes police in an unmarked vehicle, plain view of everybody. Then I want us to get the statement that the New York police released in response to this incident, and how the media is covering this. So let's look at those videos if we could, Dwayne. So what we saw there was a video of the same incident, just slightly different vantage points, where an unmarked vehicle, looked like just a regular old minivan, pulled up in the middle of this crowd. Plainclothes police hopped out, grabbed this woman, threw her in the van, and we saw uniformed officers wearing, the little bike cop uniform with the, biking shorts, use their bikes as a barrier to keep protesters, I guess, from interfering with this arrest. And let's look at the statement released by the New York City Police Department in response to this, because the police sometimes see things a little different. So this is what the NYPD says. In regards to the video on social media that took place, let me move this out the way, at 2nd Avenue and 25th Street, a woman taken into custody in an unmarked van was wanted for damaging police cameras during 5 separate criminal incidents in and around City Hall Park. The arresting officers were assaulted with rocks and bottles. Next tweet. Do I have next tweet? Okie dokie. I didn't see any rocks and bottles. Did y'all see rocks and bottles? Because, maybe there was some invisible rocks and bottles, some theoretical rocks and bottles. Maybe the nasty words being hurled towards the police, they interpreted as rocks and bottles. They continue. Yep. So when officers from the warrant squad took the woman into custody in a gray NYPD minivan this evening, they were assaulted with rocks and bottles. The warrant squad uses unmarked vehicles to effectively locate wanted suspects. Now, Justine, I have seen some national coverage of this, and it's been pretty much limited. It was, people aghast at what happened, and then the NYPD response, but nothing really challenging what happened. Like why the warrant squad has to kidnap people off the streets for damaging property. And it's not like the person set fire to Trump Towers. They're accused of damaging a handful of cameras, right? Cheap shit for the most part. How does the media interpretation of what's happening on social media and how things are being reported there versus the police accounting of things, that oftentimes does not jive?
So here's my overall take. Everything is theater, okay? Like what the cops staged out there is theater. If they were really pursuing someone on a warrant, maybe they could have done it differently. I don't really know. I don't really know the details of all of that. It didn't add up. It didn't sound truthful. And then what the media chooses to cover is theater. So for instance, we might not get an in-depth examination of that because they don't know how to wrap their heads around everyday policing, which, by the way, that was everyday policing. Cops are constantly snatching people up on the street, throwing them into unmarked vans. They've been doing that for a long time. The mainstream media can't really process that, but the Portland moms, those white moms linking arms who look like they bake brownies and are getting shot at by Trump's people, well, that's a story because that's about Trump, evil Trump. So that's sort of my take on all of this. And that's why for me, I don't get sentimental about, like, for instance, Lisa and I have talked about or has been talking about like the Baltimore Sun, they're on furlough. Yeah, we gotta like burn all this shit down because it's just really bad theater. They're casting shows. They're casting the Portland moms and they're not paying attention to the moms and wives that have been putting their bodies on the line forever around police violence. They're casting Trump as being the one who wants to repress our vote and who wants to send his bad, evil army people into the cities and hurt moms. And they're not paying attention to how the Democratic Party also wants to limit our vote, which we saw during the primaries in Democratic-led cities and states, people spending hours on the line. And so for me, this production, which is cast about as poorly as your average reality show or Spielberg movie, where it's, white hero, sad white victim, like, it's just like, it's ridiculous. It's all of it. The whole media enterprise is caught up in it. It's theater. It's not reality. I've had it. That's it.
Yeah, and just to add on that too, real quick. I mean, I think that that video showed viscerally what is wrong with both the police and the media. I mean, the cops are out here saying that, we arrested this woman for property damage. You know what I mean? So it inherently is a connotation of value, how much you value things. Do you value human life, or do you value property damage? Do you value your cameras, or do you value somebody's life that you just traumatized and all these other people that were involved in this incident without knowing what the hell was going on? And at the same time, the media then echoes those comments in their reporting, which are totally unsubstantiated and unverified. The police are saying that. So at this point, we should have been doing this for a long time. We should have been treating the media like we've started to treat the national security state, some of us on the left, and treat the cops like we treat the national security state, in that you don't trust anything they say without it actually being verified by another source. So, that's a real problem too. And I don't understand why, the media can't make that connection when they're constantly seeing this stuff every day. They're just incapable or have a lack of want to connect these things together.
I think that it's interesting how nobody wants to listen to Black people, and then stuff happens and we're all like, told you. Because a lot of this stuff that's happening, like Justine kind of pointed it out, but I remember so vividly being up at 2 a.m. on my phone watching Ferguson happen, and seeing, I didn't do too much reporting during the uprising here in Baltimore, but reading other people, these are things that were already happening to Black people. And now when they happen to white people, everybody's up in arms. So just maybe listen to Black people when we first tell you that some shit is happening.
Lisa, Black people can't be trusted. Why would they listen to Black people? We steal. What else do Black people do? We love watermelon. We can't be trusted. Our word.
And by the way, Justine was talking a bit about those moms. So that has already gone left. So basically, the white moms have already alienated the Black people that were working with them. And they had to split off because the white people were like, oh, no, we definitely know best about this protest thing. So if white people could just learn to be quiet more, that would be amazing for all of us.
But not me, right? I can keep
not you, Justine.
For a long time, this script has all the markings of World Wrestling Federation, the entertainment group. This is exactly that kind of a production where you raise one hero, then turns him into something else, then another person happens. Right. There's a constant chaos of performance over another, which is completely devoid of any context and completely takes over its own life and then just disappears like a bubble. This is exactly what has been going on with Trump presidency itself. This is the classics. And he's been a fan of WWE as well, and not to mention, of course. This is very much like that performance, which has been going on for a while now.
Yeah, we got to remember that the media led to Trump being elected to begin with. Giving 100%. Him all this constant airtime, uncritically airing hours upon hours of rambling, raging Trump speeches. And suddenly they're starting to figure out that that's not the best modus operandi to get someone that you hate out of the White House. So you might want to start being a little bit more critical.
Yeah, when in 2016, 2015, even when Trump was receiving all this attention, it was because he was good for ratings, and they were okay with putting him on for hours and hours because he was good for ratings. Terrible for everything else on the planet, but the ratings were 100% solid. Guys, I know we are low on time and we are slightly in overtime, but there are two more things that I wanted to get to. And that the first one has to do with the murder of a Black Lives Matter protester in Austin, Texas. His name is Garrett Foster. A tragedy. What happened to him just a couple of short days ago. We do have a report from Austin affiliate out there. I think it's KVUE. Let's take a look at that, Dwayne.
A memorial here at 4th Street and Congress Avenue is still filling up with signs and flowers and candles. Now, his fiance's mother told me today the two of them were attached at the hip and were protesting because they believed in the cause.
Friends and fellow protesters continued to visit the memorial for Garrett Foster, leaving notes, relighting candles, and adding flowers. Those who marched side by side with Foster called him a protector.
That's the reason why he started carrying his rifle, was to protect us.
He never would want to hurt anybody.
He mainly was trying to protect everybody.
In a video live streamed on social media on Friday, Foster told the camera person why he carried an AK-47.
They don't let us march in the streets anymore, so got to practice some of our rights. Well, our roommate got arrested, and they stopped letting us march anywhere.
His future mother-in-law, Patricia Curvin, said he started carrying the gun about a month ago. She said her daughter, Whitney Mitchell, Foster's fiance, lost all 4 limbs in 2010 and called Foster Whitney's 5th limb. She has to learn how to live without him now. His fellow protesters said they felt safer while he had his rifle on him at the protests.
And when he had some of his friends come around too with theirs, with the guns too, it made everybody else feel safe because we had our own security pretty much.
He was always paying attention. The smallest little thing, it might be small, but to him it was big, and he always kept his eye on that.
Curvin said they started attending the protests because, as an interracial couple, people had threatened them and aimed racial slurs at them.
Patricia Curvin actually set up a GoFundMe for funeral and memorial services for Garrett Foster. She closed it yesterday after it raised more than $100,000. Reporting live in downtown Austin, Mike Marut, TV News.
Yeah, I really had to sort of swallow down some tears there because obviously tragic end to Garrett Foster, and our thoughts and condolences absolutely go out to his family, especially his fiancee, as the report mentioned, who is a quadriplegic, and they had been together for a number of years. And for her to have to go on now without him and to lose him in this way is so devastating and heartbreaking. Justine, I'm not sure the amount of coverage nationally his death is receiving, but I feel because he was Black adjacent, because he was in a relationship with a Black woman, engaged to a Black woman, there is some erasure happening of his murder. By the way, no one has been arrested in connection to that murder. Police brought someone in for questioning, and they were released. We don't even know the name of the person who shot and killed this man dead in the streets. Now, what is your take on not only what happened to Garrett, but how it's been received in the media?
So I really hadn't seen anything. I saw there's a New York Times article. For me, this is the issue of gun control, where I've had my own real awakening, and a lot of white people who start to engage more with the left and with Black Lives Matter. We start to understand that gun control in this country is it's a nice idea that we wouldn't have so many guns like other countries, but on the other hand, the way that it's enforced is, racially and also politically. So it really shouldn't have been a thing that he had a gun, and I don't know that that's why he's killed, but I do see the reporting about that as being kind of shocking that he walked around with an AK-47, whereas because he was protecting leftists. And frankly, I could understand why. I almost have been pushing back myself on gun control, realizing that we live in a police state, and if the police are going to have these weapons, and if white nationalists are going to be able to walk through the streets with them, then in a sense, everybody needs to be protected. And that is a really sad story. I would think, I'm not sure about media coverage, but I would say for sure, this is not getting a full police investigation, because it shouldn't be too hard to figure out who it was. The person drove by, but it really shouldn't be hard, for them to solve this one.
Absolutely. And Lisa, there's a lot to unpack there. And Justine raises a great point that the police investigation apparently, at least outwardly looking into this, it doesn't not appear as if they are too enthusiastic about trying to arrest somebody for this. But we sort of discussed the coverage of this and how it's being framed nationally, as Justine mentioned, with the gun angle being part of it as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you hit the nail on the head in saying that the reason why this isn't getting the kind of coverage that maybe it would get if this gentleman was not protecting a Black. I think that the fact that he had a Black woman fiance and the fact that he was protecting leftists definitely plays a role. I think that part of the contract that we have set up here in America is if you're white, especially if you're a white man, then there are certain things that you're allowed to do, and you do not kind of trade that off for the people that are beneath you. I really think it's interesting that there have been a few white activists who were killed protesting. I think Heather Heyer was killed a few years ago. And these are people that I feel confident if they were on the other side, if they were out, protesting wearing a mask or shouting about immigrants raping them or something, they would, it'd be a totally different thing. And unfortunately, I think that's why it's harder for a lot of white people to come to this side, because there is so much comfort there, but it's kind of a necessary thing for white people to do, or else change isn't going to happen.
Exactly. Aman, Lisa brings up a good point. Those Reopen America protests, there was lots of people armed at these protests, but at the same time, they weren't met with police violence. And even from the counter protesters, they weren't met with violence. And had one of those Reopen America protesters been killed, it probably would have been a much bigger deal.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's true. And also from the coverage standpoint, I think the kind of charged environment which is kind of producing all the coverage from the mainstream press or the side stream press and the citizens journalism, I think one of the problem which is emerging is that it literally kind of waters down every definitive view, knowing that people have so much to do at this point in time to fend for themselves, and at the same time grappling with the facts of situations which are made complicated by so many of perspectives and then counter perspectives, is also kind of muddying the water, Kim, and that only adds to the problem. And it goes, and that, which is then compounded, of course, by the algorithms instituted by these platforms like Facebook, for that matter, and Instagram and whatnot. And that's part of the problem. And I think the role for authentic journalism to kind of bring definitive pictures to the table is going to be more and more important every day. And like Lisa said, it would be probably better if more diversity were to be brought in, not just into the newsroom, but also the production and now the algorithm, which is where the new fight over truth is.
Red in the comments says, gun control first came about after the Black Panthers staged an open carry demonstration in California in the 1960s. That's true. And Reese Mack in the comments says, a bunch of far-right pro-Trump protesters had guns at Michigan, and they were allowed to infiltrate the state house. Garrett Foster had a gun in support of Black Lives Matter, and he gets shot. Andrew, what's your take to what happened to Garrett? I mean, clearly a tragedy, but this should be a bigger deal. Heather Heyer became a household name after Charlottesville, but this isn't getting the same spotlight.
Yeah, I mean, I think as everyone outlined, it just shows just the clear and obvious double standard that's going on. But at the same time, I think that the media has a bias towards centrist, left movement here in America. I guess people categorize it as that, in adjacent to, Trump. But basically, they have that ideology. And so seeing left-wing people who are progressives, leftists, with guns, scares them. They don't understand how to understand it ideologically. When they think that people on the left should be for, limiting guns, because they view right-wing groups as the gun groups, and, people who carry guns outside of that, they're kind of confused by it. They don't really understand why they're doing that, because again, like we talked about, they don't understand the crux of these systemic issues that they're trying to explain day in and day out, and or not trying to explain because of how the mainstream media functions. So I think that that's actually part of this broader conversation as to why they're not looking at this in the same light that they would with a Trump supporter with a gun. Because, we all know for a fact that, if a Black Lives Matter supporter had acted violently, towards a Trump supporter and it ended in that Trump supporter's life, I mean, it'd be number one or number two thing on the New York Times. It'd be Washington Post. Trump would be freaking out about it. I mean, they'd be using it as political, ammo, basically, to go after certain groups in society that they don't like. And, I think this is a reflection of them being not connected with the movement and what's going on. And their coverage is indicative of that.
Gang, I want us to close out by giving our condolences to Herman Kaine. the 74-year-old syndicated radio host. He was an author. He was also a businessman connected to Godfather's Pizza. Former GOP candidate for the presidency back in 2012. Herman Cain died of COVID, of coronavirus. I was a little stunned when I saw this today. Dwayne, I want you to pop up that tweet that we have from Herman Cain, where he attended Trump's Tulsa rally back in late June. And there was a picture of him smiling, happy. That is not the tweet, but there we go. Yes. All them people need to go get tested. I mean, I look at this picture and I'm like, really, y'all? Really? Did you really think it was all good? Did you see the statistics of Black people disproportionately dying from this disease, and you thought it was real cool to be sitting up there maskless in this arena in the midst of this pandemic? And it's in less than a month later after this picture was taken, Herman Cain is dead. Guys, I know we don't share a political ideology with Herman Cain, but the fact that he was a notable political figure, at least in some circles on the right, and that he died from COVID, do you think that will affect, I guess, the way that people who are disbelievers in how deadly this virus is, the people that are still out here not wearing masks, who are not adhering to social distancing, and doing things to help stem the spread of this, will this wake them up? Like, here is a Black person that y'all liked, and the COVID got him.
No.
Will this change minds, in your opinions?
They're already coming up with a story, which is that he actually died of cancer. Because he's a cancer survivor. And I think he survived 10, 15 years ago. It's a long time ago, but you can already see in the responses that they're deciding that his death was actually because of cancer, because he had this pre-existing condition. And I don't think so. I think I don't like to get high and mighty about people who were against masks dying of it, because I can't say I haven't done some dumb things in my life that I knew wouldn't work out. But yeah, I think everyone's going to keep learning the hard way, but they already have a spin on it. If you are Black or disabled or have a pre-existing condition or elderly or poor or fat, they're going to come up with a story. And for the other ones who have like no pre-existing conditions, are healthy, young, shouldn't be dying of COVID, they're just going to talk about how incredibly rare it is. But it's sort of our fault for not having perfect health, that if we die of COVID, it was going to happen. It has nothing to do with masks. That's their ideology right now.
I actually agree to that. I think this, Kim, is a cultural issue. It's a systemic issue, and I wish if one person could have dented that kind of a mindset which is all around us. But this is not how it is. The stakes are too high now, and this is the hallmark of what many people have chosen to call a post-truth society, which means that people don't give a shit about what the truth or the science is of a matter. They just want to put spin on it, and they just want to confirm their own biases and their own beliefs, and they just want to live in it. These are bubble societies. That's how also the Facebook algorithms kind of divide people up as well into different bubbles, where people just want to confirm what they already know and don't want to wish into any critical thinking. And unfortunately, this is not going to, just like it was said, it's not going to make any difference in that. So, but I hope it does in some way.
Andrew Corkery?
Yeah, so I agree with everyone on the panel so far. I do think that there is an interesting point here, though, which is that COVID, has illuminated a lot of issues in society that previously were not brought to the forefront. And I think that this is one of them. And I think that this is one of the issues that Trump and his ideology, as much as they try to spin and as much as they try to do it, are actually, medically and scientifically incapable of being able to totally spin this outside of the purview of their limited base. So, I think that's the point in which, COVID is the point in which the Trump tide has the ability to turn, in that he can't keep gaslighting it because the numbers, people are dying. People's friends and family members and people that they know are actually dying. Trump can't spin that. You can't spin when you lose a mother, when you lose a father, when you lose a grandparent or someone that you love. That's not really spinnable. So outside of his base, but, we're going to see how much that post-truth worldview holds up in the face of an increasing, amount of COVID cases and COVID deaths come the fall.
Lisa, is Herman Cain a casualty of the cult of Trumpism? He had previously called the COVID-19 pandemic a hoax. And as you saw, he was out in public, sans mask. And, sorry, my dog. My bad. They're upset. Dogs, please.
No.
Okay. Oh, I'm so sorry. Lisa, if you don't mind, can you just, okay. Wait, I'm freaking out. I can't find my mute button. Oh, Jesus. Okay. Hey, knock it off. Wait.
It's fine.
The whole solemnness of my question. Lisa, if you don't mind, would you please pick up where I left off?
I'm going to keep this real brief so I don't say anything ignorant that my mother would be mad about. I'm going to just say, I don't know what to say. People should listen to facts, but they're not. I don't know what else to say. Yeah, that's all I can say without saying something bad.
Fair enough. Guys, we'll leave it there. Breezy and Bagheera said, what's up to everybody on YouTube. I'd like to thank our fantastic panel, Lisa Snowden-McCray, Aman Azhar, Justine Barron, Andrew Corkery. Thank you guys for stopping by. And thank y'all for hanging out in overtime, too. I know I held y'all hostage for 20 extra minutes, so my bad. But appreciate y'all hanging out.
Yeah, because I have crabs in me. I got steamed crabs that I put on hold for you, Kim.
Thank
Wow.
you. Now I got to ask you offline where you get the
Patience
crabs
truly
from.
is a virtue.
Hey guys, a couple things. Don't forget, tonight, a brand new episode of the Police Accountability Report that starts right here, right where you are located at 9 p.m. And tomorrow, there is no Stir Crazy because Dwayne said he don't like us on Friday, so he's going to go do something else. But we will be back here on Stir Crazy on Tuesday. So, gang, have a great weekend. Please be sure to keep the Rona up off you. The Rona is out here very much jumping on people. So please wear your mask, wash your hands, social distance. I will see y'all next week. Thank you. Have a great weekend. See you. Bye.